At daybreak, when the moon of light rose, they go to their destination. The next day was clear. However, the atmosphere felt heavy and foreboding, like the calm before a storm. Konaway groomed, fixed his outfit, ate and drank a little, and finally headed for the depths of the forest. As they proceeded north, his endlessly green field of view suddenly cleared. He squinted at the unexpected brightness. There was a fantastic spectacle before him. Field of 4 colors. The small grassy area was teeming with light. Red, yellow, blue, and green transparent light overlapped, forming an indescribable color. Why do I get the feeling that this is all a setup for him to do something with the snakes at this place? Each light was cast from a surrounding stone on the grass. The smooth surfaces reflected the moonlight like mirrors. It was just like what he had heard in the stories. "What a strange place," Asato muttered. He was captivated. This was a scene that could be called beautiful, but Konaway felt it was a bit ominous. Since he treaded into the space, deep inside his body, something was reacting. Was it his stomach? He felt sick, like his blood was boiling. Something was off about this place. He felt pressure, as if he was being wrapped in an invisible shroud. "The field of 4 colors. A door should be opened here, shouldn't it?" And those were Leeks' words. Ray, lost in thought, stared at his feet in silence and cautiously swayed his tail until he finally turned and nodded to Konaway. "Stand here." He pointed to the grass where the 4 colors of light intersected. Not knowing what else to do, Konaway set foot in the grass. When he stood where all the lights shone together, it almost seemed like overflowing water as it shimmered remarkably. The colors seemed to form a thin film over the outside world, distorting his view. It was a very mysterious place. He stood still for a while, but nothing seemed to happen. "Maybe I need to do something." "Like what?" "I don't know. A ritual or something?" When Konaway hesitated, Ray sighed. "Were we deceived?" "These stones are unusual. I've never seen ones like these." "Oh. These stones are unusual. I've never seen ones like these." Asato approached one of the 4 stones and tilted his head as if he'd noticed something. "Is this a crest?" There was something like a sigil carved into the stone. They were weathered, but since they were so large, Konaway could see even from where he stood. All 4 stones seemed to have a carved crest. "Wait!" Ray suddenly narrowed his eye sharply. "This shape." Konaway looked closely as well. Suddenly, Konaway's heart throbbed. His eyes were glued to the carved sigil. The tip of his tail quivered. His mind knew something was different. It was just a carved crest. But Ray looked at Konaway with a stern expression. Asato turned, startled as well. "This one, and this one, and all of these, aren't they the same as the marks on Konaway?" but his words did not reach Conaway. Conaway's eyes were fixed to the carved sigils for an entirely different reason. Yep, this has all been a plot, a ploy to have Conaway bring them here to bring the snakes into the real world, probably, or something. A snake? The seals seemed like invisible snakes. It was his imagination. Cress could have all kinds of forms. But it was pointless to think this way. Those were serpents. He brought his quivering fingertips to his lips. Those serpents that entered his mouth, glided down his throat, gnawed away at his insides. Their slippery scales and fleshy sensation were vividly revived. They trailingly pulled to and fro at his insides. Nausea suddenly rose, and Conaway sank to his knees while covering his mouth with his hand. The serpents were rampaging throughout his stomach, the 4 snakes he had swallowed that night. Conaway, what's wrong? Someone's hand was grasping his shoulder. He couldn't recognize whose it was. His shrouded view could only see the green grass and the light. Anything past that was a blur. Conaway heaved for a breath, and saliva began dripping. His stomach and throat were burning. Unable to bear it any longer, Conaway vomited. There was a high-pitched ringing in his ears. He didn't understand why. It was painful. His heart pounded at a frightening speed. His thoughts dimming, Conaway heard a voice speaking in his mind. Do you remember this feeling? He heard a voice from the depths of his body. Getting up in a panic, Conaway was terrified. He couldn't see anything. As if he were in a dense fog, he could not even discern colors. Occasionally he heard what might have been Rei and Asato's voices, but they immediately faded. What he did now was that the snakes were raging. No, what he did know was that the snakes were raging in his body. His stomach felt hot. He felt like his body was squeezed as thin as his tail and groaned out. The pain tormented his defenseless body directly. His instincts cried out in alarm. Maintain consciousness. He fumbled for his tail and held tight. Trying not to lose consciousness, Conaway dug his claws into his tail. Conaway. Conaway bared his teeth in pain, but even the feeling of his claws digging into his weakest part gradually became distant. He clung to his last shred of consciousness. Don't let go. If he let go, he let go. Conaway awoke to a cold sensation on his cheek. He opened his eyes. What he thought was cold was just the wind blowing. Where was he? When he tried to get up, Conaway grimaced at the sharp pain in his stomach. The uncomfortable feeling of the violent snakes was still fresh in his mind. Holding his belly through his clothes, and using one arm to prop himself up, Conaway slowly lifted up his body. He just shifted his bottom and sat back down. Where were Rei and Asato? When Conaway looked around, he saw his view was clouded with darkness. He blinked several times to try and clear his eyes, but this was different. The 4 stones and grass were gone, and he didn't know what lay beyond the fog either. When he looked to his hand, there was no floor. No, his hand was surely touching something. The floor was invisible. No matter how hard he looked, Conaway saw nothing. He heard the thumping of his heart awfully clearly. With all his nerves on edge, Conway looked at his surroundings with bated breath. He didn't know where he was or what was happening. When he began to gulp down saliva, he realized his throat was parched. Only the tip of his tail shook slightly to indicate his tension. Thump, thump. Conway's ears twitched at the sudden noise. It was a heavy, wet sound, as if in a womb. The tension rising in him, his claws instinctively scratched at the ground. Though the floor seemed stiff, his nails sank in slightly with a strange sensation. And then I go to the menu. And then he could hear music, both near and far. A melody sounded like an illusion. Then Conway suddenly realized it was the same as the dream. If so, what came afterwards would be As if reading his thoughts, an impending green light burst open. He was blinded, his view cut off painfully by the light. The snake would come next. It made a slithering sound and coiled around him before disappearing from his sight. Conway stood. Only that feeling he hated. Agitation coursed down his spine. The fur on his tail swelled. When Conway opened his eyes and tried to endure the dazzling glare, the light struck again. This time, it was the yellow light. Then blue after that. Then red light struck and exploded. No matter how much he squeezed his eyes shut, the exceedingly bright light could be seen through his eyelids. He didn't suffer physically, but Conway grit his teeth in shock, struggling to breathe. Green, yellow, blue, red. The same colors as the snakes in the dream. The snakes wriggled inside his belly. After the last trail of light passed, it became quiet. He heard and saw nothing. Suspicious, Conway tried to slowly open his eyes. Pitch-black darkness opened up. Even if he tried to look around, it was no different than when his eyes were shut. Conway sat down in the middle of the deep darkness. What was happening? As if it was the only sound in existence, he heard the beating of his heart. It pulsated right beside his ear. The darkness was heavy. Sweat formed in the palms of his hands. Conway wanted to escape, but here, he didn't know where he could turn. He got down on his knees, huddled over and held his breath. In the strained silence, something swayed in front of him. Restraining his heart that seemed like it would explode, Conway firmly strained his eyes. He furrowed his brow. A small flame burned in the sky ahead. It was a green flame. Flickering faintly like a snake's tongue, it cast a wavering light in the darkness. Fire wasn't good. Instinctively, he backed away. The sweat blurring on his palms worsened. There was a sound behind him, and his body went stiff. Conway looked back slowly with a foreboding feeling. Now, a new flame had appeared. This time, it was a yellow flame. Then, red and blue flames emerged from the darkness to his left and right. The flames that were the same colors as the snakes floated around Conway, as if surrounding him. No, Conway muttered, eyes wide open in fright. His body was frozen. He felt like his tense nerves would explode. Forgetting to blink, Conway hurriedly looked around at the four flames. His wavering tail swelled and trembled with uncertainty. If only he could run. Anywhere was okay. He wanted to escape from this siege somehow. No matter where he turned, flames would be there. Konaway was overwhelmed, unsure where to run to. Suddenly, the flames flared up in unison and began to blaze even more intensely. Huh? He stopped moving in surprise, then jumped back. The flames crackled as if to intimidate Konaway, their tips swaying. Fire. Fire. Konaway was cornered. At the center of the circle, he helplessly lowered his ears. The hand supporting his body slipped, and his shoulder hit the floor. At that moment, Konaway's eyes grasped something within the flame. When they flickered down for just an instant, he saw something tethered there. He grit his teeth desperately and stared, frowning against the heat. Shadows. In each of the 4 flames, he saw a black shadow. Someone was there. A different sound echoed in Konaway's ears, stunning him. Okay. He's curling up his ears and tail. What was his fucking name? Fuck, what? Art dude with the tattoos. I can't remember his name, but he was blonde and he was in Kojaku's rap. He's curling up his ears and his tail, and his knees are shaking. He doesn't need to be so afraid. That was in bad taste. Let's finish this quickly. Don't be so impatient. It'll be over soon enough. After a few seconds, Konaway finally recognized those voices. Someone's suppressed chuckling accompanied the swaying, vividly colored flames. Instinctively, a threatening sound rumbled from his throat. "They're dangerous," a voice said somewhere in his head. But the depths of his stomach pulsed, and Konaway held his breath. He soon grimaced and roughly exhaled. Inside his stomach, the snakes wriggled about in delight. At the same time, the markings on his body grew hot. Although not enough to make him jump, the heat seemed to steadily scorch his skin. Huh? He is suffering. Can't be helped. Our altars are in there and reacting. That's natural. Finally, where he's truly an unshakable soul, or if he'll fall into someone else's hands. I'm looking forward to finding out. He's mine. Oh yeah, you're pretty confident. It's the biggest catch in a long time. I won't let him escape. Various voices rained down from overhead. In the meantime, the serpents continued to violently writhe inside Konaway's body. The marks continued emitting heat, and Konaway suffered the enduring torment, feeling as if he was being tortured to death. It hurt. All his emotions jumbled into one big mass. Without sinking down, without rebelling, they stood still in a stagnant froth. Unable to spit them out, he grit his teeth and contorted his face. Looks like he's in pain, huh? Well, Let's get started. This'll decide everything. This is so fun. Oh, how will this end? Hazily opening his eyes, he peeked at them. In his fading vision, the yellow flame flared up particularly strongly, then died down little by little. A black shadow manifested in the wavering flames. Konaway's eyes opened wide at what protruded from the head of the silhouette. They weren't ears. Those were horns. It was a devil. Yo, you heard right. I'm Verge. I rule over pleasure. Am I a spirit? God? Devil? Well, anyone's fine with me. The devil descended cautiously from the sky, as if he were stepping down invisible stairs, then stood right in front of Konaway. He was much larger than Konaway and had short silver hair. There was no escaping his sharp gaze. When Konaway looked closely, he saw a black, wiry tail, different from a cat's. He was overwhelmed by the breathtaking sight. Just standing next to Verge made the air oppressive. It wasn't like the shadow he'd fought before. The presence of a person with power incomparable to his own reached his skin. This was a devil. The yellow snake wriggled joyfully in the depths of his stomach. I've said all this, so say something already. Hey! Scowling in displeasure, Verge moved his legs, touching the tip of his boot to the chin of the crouching Konaway. Reflexively feeling aversion, Konaway instinctively turned his face away to shake him off. While enduring the crushing pain, he glared back and mustered his voice from his parched throat. Why me? Verge whistled. Why, you ask? Why is that? Just as one would expect from a cat. Full of pride. Say, do you know what position you're in? When Konaway tried to withdraw, Verge leaned his tall figure over and squatted down, grabbing Konaway's shoulder with one hand. The foreign fingers felt like they were mercilessly dug into him, and he grimaced. What defiant eyes. They make me sick. But I don't hate it, because tormenting you is worth it. Konaway was forced to peer into the sharp light dwelling in those pupils. He desperately fought the urge to look away. It was overwhelming. It was also different. Verge's glare seemed to halt his breath. As if he could see right into Konaway's mind, Verge smirked. He loaded more force into the fingers digging into Konaway's shoulder, making him grit his teeth. Now, look into my eyes. No. Don't just say no. Verge pulled Konaway's shoulder closer, and the distance between their faces narrowed. Konaway was going to turn his eyes, but he couldn't do it in time. Odd light swayed in Verge's eyes. Suddenly, numbness, like a strong electric shock, ran from his tail up his entire body, and Konaway arched his back and cried out involuntarily. What was that just now? Surprised at how loud his yell was, he was ashamed and covered his mouth with the back of his hand. But the numbness in the rest of his body did not disappear. On the contrary, luscious waves rose from his waist. All his hair stood on end at the intense sensation. His fluffed-out tail shivered in pain. Oh, poor thing. Your ears are all flat. So you feel things differently from a normal guy, huh? Oh, that's too bad. Konaway sighed unintentionally at the low, laughing voice touching the soft fur on his ears. The snake raged within his guts, and his markings burned hot. The waves drowned out the pain. His body was hot. He didn't understand this. His lower limbs ached and throbbed. The unknown passion sought an exit and raged in a swirling whirlpool. It made him dizzy. Opening his eyes wide, Konaway salivated from slightly parted lips. He wanted so much that he reacted even to his own restless breathing. What was this? Konaway didn't know what was happening to his own body, confused and frightened. What was happening? BDSM is happening. What? Is it good? It's your choice. Huh. Well, that's an easy choice. I've got it. Later. Just like in that dream, the words naturally came out as Konaway desperately chose within the chaos of his thoughts. The impulse disappeared from his body as if it had fallen, and Verge vanished in a puff of smoke. All that remained was his discomfort, the snake writhing in his stomach, and the heat of his markings. To be continued. Dun 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 dun.